Hey, what's happening everybody? Welcome back to the Hypered Network and another discussion video over Stephen King and his larger universe. Today, we're taking a look at the newest television series hitting the AT&T audience network, Mr. Mercedes. Fair bit of warning, I haven't actually read the book or any of the sequels. This review is going to be me looking at the show on its own merits outside of the notion that it's an adaptation. And I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as much as I can. So, with that out of the way, what do I think about Mr. Mercedes? For a first episode, it's off to a great start. The basic premise follows retired detective Bill Hodges just trying to get through life and find some new purpose now that his time with the force has come to a close. However, the old days just keep calling back to him. Literally in this case. One of his most haunting cases is brought back into the limelight as he gets a cryptic and taunting message from the Mercedes Killer, a psychopath responsible for running over a number of unemployed civilians in a line at the job fair, killing several and leaving a heavy rack of guilt over Hodges' head. Pulling in help from several allies, it soon becomes a race to put an end to the Mercedes Killer and finally bring closure to the case he just couldn't solve. Outside of that premise, the show is pretty great with what I've seen so far, no joke. I didn't actually have any huge expectations for this when I first heard about it. The audience network sprang some admittedly unfounded skepticism towards the quality, but I have to say I think the show can rival some of the best out there on television right now. Brendan Gleeson plays Bill Hodges in this show, and he does a terrific job playing a retired, aimless man that's just looking for some reason to continue on with his life. He's tired, cranky, but driven to finally bring an end to a case that's hung about his mind like this terrible funk. You really feel for the guy throughout the episode, and the horror that comes from being watched and taunted by some psychopath really starts to play with you as much as it does Hodges. It's this sort of realistic horror, something rare from a Stephen King story, but it really plays out as a crime thriller more than anything, and the role Hodges has in the story really sells me on this protagonist so far. As for the antagonist, Brady Hartsfield, the show does this great job at setting him up as a sadistic killer living in plain sight. The show surprised me pretty early on, honestly, in that it's not necessarily a mystery about who Mr. Mercedes is, but rather it's just about the cat and mouse game between two opposing sides. We learn in this first episode that the Mercedes Killer is Brady Hartsfield, a young man working grueling hours at an electric appliance shop and living in a physically and somewhat emotionally broken household. Outside of this though, he has a special project that he's working on, one that involves him toying and spying on the withering Bill Hodges, whom he's taken a special interest in since he declared he would catch the killer 2 years ago. It's a really intriguing dynamic seeing two sides of the story play out like this, and like I said, Harry Treadaway plays the character extremely well, balancing his role between two different personas, all the while we see the true personality underneath. And even the supporting cast does a great job building these two actors up. They all really work well in building the setting and tone of the series moving forward, from Bill's young assistant in ward Jerome to Brady's wreck of a mother. The series certainly hasn't held any punches in getting great actors who can sell the potency of the narrative, and they all create a fantastic look into the psyche of our own two leads. They all kind of work to highlight the demons that plague both of them, and their actions give us an indication on how they both deal with the damaging world around them, and how both go about their problems in a non-healthy way. It really sells this idea that there's a monster within all of us, and how dangerous that can be to everyone around. Okay, so one other thing I have to mention, the show is brutal. Honestly, it's just goddamn brutal. The opening scenes of the show present us with the murder in question, the Mercedes Killer running over a number of jobless civilians, and it's just really hard to watch. The show's explicit visuals, while maybe not as gory as something like The Walking Dead, they really highlight the heinous nature of the crimes presented. And it makes the show just seem that much more real, which is the part that I think really gets to you. Seeing such a horrible crime presented in such crippling reality just wasn't something I was expecting. And then to see how the Mercedes Killer talks about it and his recollection of that night really leaves a sort of pit in your stomach. Not to mention, well, there's a scene in this where we see a little bit of Brady's home life shown in more vivid detail, and it just adds another level of complexity and just downright depravity to Brady Hartsfield and his entire worldview. But overall, this is a great start to this series. It's wonderfully paced, the characters and actors are on point, and the graphic content, I think it just adds a little bit more to the dark nature of the story. And it puts it a mile higher than what I was originally expecting. Mr. Mercedes Episode 1 gets a 9 out of 10 from me. I highly recommend all of you go check this one out. Anyways guys, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you all later for more news updates and discussions on Mr. Mercedes and Stephen King's larger literary universe. This is Luke signing out.